Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today it's the Astrology Star Sisters, and we're talking about planets going direct in November of 2025. I want to welcome Madam Simon. Hi, Simon. How you doing?
Very good, Liz. How are you?
Good. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah, I'm enjoying being back too. Thank you.
And November's been a busy month. We had the retrogrades, now we've got the directs, so it's busy.
Oh,
So as I said before, we are the Astrology Star Sisters doing the planet stationing direct for November. And Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, and visionary artist. And you can reach her at iconalchemy.com. I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive, and tarot reader also. And you can reach me at alightpath.com. So we're jumping right into the November planet stationing direct. On the 21st, a couple of days ago, we had Ceres at 2 degrees Aries and 30 minutes station direct. On the 27th, Saturn is going to station direct at 26 degrees Pisces and 9 minutes. And on the 29th, Mercury will station retrograde in Scorpio. And I'm sorry, I forgot to write the degrees down for that one, but we'll find it here a little bit later. So here's Ceres, a picture of Ceres. She's a dwarf planet and also an asteroid. And on November 21st at 11:02 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, she stationed direct. And Ceres is classified as an asteroid and or a dwarf planet. Her orbit is 4.6 years around the sun, named after the goddess of agriculture, fertility, and harvest. And some key words or what Ceres represents is grains, harvest, food, nourishment, loss and grief, nurturing, parenting, mother figure, fertility, and self-care. Would you like to add anything, Madam Simon?
Ceres is known as the mother of the asteroids. So.
Thank you. And here's the chart for Ceres stationing direct. And I think on the slide before, I forgot to change the time. So it's was at 4 p.m. on November 21st when Ceres stationed direct. And here we have the aspects that Ceres makes when she turned direct. She was conjunct Neptune, sextile Pluto and Sedna, square Vesta and Hygeia forming a T-square, trine the Sun, and sesquiquadrate Venus. So what jumps out at you, Simon?
Well, I'd say it's kind of a combination of things. She's been cozying up to Neptune and Saturn within the ongoing minor grand trine of the outer planets and Sedna. But she's across the border between eldest sign of Pisces, last sign of the zodiac, and youngest sign, Aries, first sign of the zodiac. And so Neptune and Saturn have gone over into Pisces, and Ceres is still with them in terms of orb, in terms of the distance from them. Okay. And so therefore is conjunct, but she's in another sign and in another modality and at the beginning of things, whereas they are wrapping up some things at the end of things. So she went retrograde and they did their retrograde, right? They've been going along, but she was kind of trailing behind, and now she's here in Aries and they're going to head back into Aries. So, so she's covering space that they are going to be covering in 2026. So it's kind of like she's setting that groundwork there for them, which then suggests to us that, Ceres themes of addressing our losses, addressing our grief, nurturing and nourishing ourselves and others are things that we should be paying attention to, because when Neptune and Saturn come through that territory, they're going to kind of disrupt things, right? And so it helps for us then to kind of address some of these topics in advance, right? So that when Neptune and Saturn kind of reconfigure reality in that area, that we've already done some of our internal work, and maybe some external work, paying attention to how is it that we nourish ourselves and others. Can we do things that will make it so that we are resilient? If there's disruptions in supply chains, for example, and in recent years, we've gone through enough of that now it shouldn't be a surprise to us so much if that happens again. But now we need to pay attention to, are we well prepared? Can we be resilient? Do we have challenging feelings about that kind of thing that need to be addressed? So I think that can be a useful way to look at Ceres moving forward here. Now, being more, what would you call it, direct, right, with her topics, okay? And in combination with the other outers, remember that this is also how we take care of ourselves, how we take care of our neighbors, how we take care of our families, right? How we nurture and nourish, but especially starting with nurturing and nourishing ourselves, right? Because she's in Aries, and Aries is very much concerned with the self, okay? And so, this does very much strike me as putting on our own masks before we, put them on others, just like, in an airplane situation. So yes, I feel like Ceres moving forward is asking us to do some of that preparation work, and is doing it within the context of the larger changes that are affecting the whole world. Okay. Square Vesta and Aia in that T square with them. Aia is currently in the sign of Cancer. Okay. And so is concerned with the health and well-being of the family. And also, our own kind of emotional sensitivities. Cancer symbol is the crab, which is self-protective, right? Soft and squishy on the inside, hard shell, claws, right? To defend itself with, and it kind of sidles along. It doesn't go directly at things, right? And so, among other things, that suggests a need for us to pay attention to the emotional well-being of those within our immediate circle, right? And so there is some challenge then between that of doing the self-care that Ceres is asking us to do, and at the same time paying attention to the emotional well-being of those around us. Okay. And how are those things affecting each other? And then, because they're in this T square with Vesta, Vesta is our focus. She is our understanding of what keeps us alive and alight, right? She is the goddess of the hearth. But because she's the Roman goddess of the hearth, she is also the goddess of the hearth of the empire. Okay. What keeps the nation alight, what keeps society going. Okay. And obviously there have been, questions about what is doing that. And, there have been shifts, right? Not just in the United States, an awful lot of countries have been going through some upheaval. And so we're now being asked to balance our own self-care with the needs of those closest to us, the emotional well-being of those closest to us. Wow. There are some very some real and practical considerations about, what do we focus on? What sustains us? What sustains our society? And is that going a little haywire? Okay. And so all three of those things are in this challenging aspect with each other. And anytime you've got a T square, T squares, any square is tough love, right? And a T square is two squares in an opposition. So some extra tough love, right? Um, and and it's kind of like you got to tough it out through the challenges. Yes, you may grow because of it. You may learn because of it. And these challenging aspects tend to be motivational, right? They either, in the case of the squares, which have the nature of Mars, they force us to move. In the case of the opposition, however, there is that kind of like, okay, there's an awareness and even stillness because the opposition is of the nature of Saturn. Okay. So there can be kind of hurry up and go, or hurry up and go, hurry up and stay, hurry up and wait, kind of energy going on when we've got a T square at work. And so it's kind of like we have to figure out ways for each of these topics or areas of interest to kind of wait their turn to then be integrated or addressed, but we can't stay with any one. We have to keep addressing the needs of each, right? Okay.
Right. Don't let go of one to address another. It's like they both need a lot of attention and adjustments, and be patient and do it as balanced as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And then Ceres is trying the sun, who is at this point of the direct station is at the end of Scorpio, but of course now, by the time we're recording this, has moved into Sagittarius and is therefore more closely trine with Ceres, and it's no longer a cross elemental trine, right? It's now thoroughly within the fire element. And the fire element, of course, relates to action. The water element relates to our emotions. So, it's kind of like at the time of the station, the sun's moving into that trine with Ceres, but is bringing that emotional content, that emotional weight of Scorpio. And remember that one of Ceres' themes is dealing with loss and grief. Okay. And so I feel like, this, as the sun is moving into this trine, as it's applying to the trine, but is still in Scorpio, there is that weight of loss and grief to be addressed. And then by the time the sun has moved into the Sagittarius ingress and is now in the same element as Ceres within the trine, now there is okay, well, what are you going to do about it? What is the action you're going to take to address those feelings of loss or grief or literal hunger? Okay. That says sesquiquadrate to Venus, there is a certain amount of friction that we can see with the sesquiquadrate. It is a square and a half. They are sometimes considered to be a little easier to discharge, to integrate than the actual square, but there still is friction and tension that can be there. And so that can, among other things, have an impact on our relationships, can also have an impact on our finances. Okay. So again, these are the kinds of things where anytime that the planets are doing challenging or, kind of dicey stuff in the sky, we need to exercise a little bit more discernment. We need to just recognize, and it's not looking at it from the standpoint of like, oh my goodness, the sky is falling and, scared about it. No, it's, oh yeah, here is a potential area of friction. And if I already know about that, then if it happens to rear its ugly head, I can address it. And I do want to point out that when we've got those challenging aspects, like I said earlier, they can be motivational. They can get us to actually, solve problems that the more supportive aspects just kind of allowed to continue, right? And so, if there are in particular challenges between what different people within a relationship want. That's what I would very much see with this particular aspect, because they're both in Mars ruled signs. So it's, how are we getting what we want, and what is our how are we using our willpower, right? And our energy. And if there's kind of friction between, that very active and kind of impulsive Aries version of Ceres versus the more intense and driven version of Venus, right? Okay, that friction, you can see some tempers flare. Okay. You can see people getting a little cranky, like, so and so's being selfish, or, it's all about them, or, that kind of thing. Or why aren't they paying attention? They're running through like, a bull in a china shop and knocking stuff over. I, as a very Marsy person, constantly knock things over. But recognizing that that's currently part of the astrological landscape then allows us to maybe have, extend some compassion, some grace. Okay, I know you didn't mean to knock that thing over. Let's just clean it up and like move on, or figure out a better place to put things, or whatever, right? Okay. However, let's go back to the very beginning here. This series is conjoining Neptune. Now, it's a cross-sign conjunction that does soften it a little bit, but still conjoining Neptune. And that means that there is a lot more potential for confusion, for kind of fogged perceptions about Ceres topics. Neptune can also bring a certain amount of nostalgia, a sense of things, things were better in the past, which is not necessarily the case. But that, that can very much show up and combine itself with Ceres themes of loss and grief. Okay. So just be aware of that if you're like in this mode of like, oh, I have lost whatever, and it was so much better then. Maybe that's not actually true. Or it's something that, okay, yeah, you can kind of like get out those feelings and work through that process of grieving, but it's not a permanent condition. It's not something for you to be constantly stuck in, right? Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was great. Anything else?
One of the benefits to the conjunction with Neptune is bigger vision, right?
Yes.
Seeing things on that grand scale. And so that can be useful then for people trying to address things like the needs of one's local food bank, or, how do we engage in aid programs to make sure that people are fed and have their needs met, right? So,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So now we're going to go on to Saturn Station Direct on November 27th at 11:02 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I'm not sure if I changed the time on this one either, but we'll find out here in a few minutes. So Saturn traditionally rules Capricorn and Aquarius. Structure, responsibility, discipline, rules and regulation, government, hard work, boundaries, karma, maturity, authority, sense of duty, patience, and perseverance. Restrictions, limitations, fear, self-doubt, hardship, and depression. Those are some cautions. Knees, legs, bones, joints, tendons, ligaments, teeth, skin, and old age. And Saturn is named after the Roman god of agricultural and wealth, father of Jupiter. Would you like to add anything?
No, I'd say that pretty much covers it.
In Saturn direct, yes, I didn't change the time, is at 7:52 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at 26 degrees Pisces and 9 minutes on November 27th. And it's stationed retrograde back in July on the 12th or 13th, depending on the east or west coast. And here Saturn in the Seattle chart is in the 9th house. And then the aspects for Saturn direct is conjunct Neptune, and it's trine Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter, forming a grand water trine. Go ahead.
Okay, so now Saturn having station direct in Pisces, when Saturn and Neptune went back into Pisces, it was this they're doing that kind of one last wrapping up of addressing their themes within a Piscean setting, right? And Pisces is eldest sign, end of the zodiac. So it is very much this sense of like, oh, there are endings to be tended to. Okay. And they're doing this on their way now. Well, Saturn is stationed direct, and I think Neptune stations direct in the beginning of December. They're heading now back toward their little date with destiny when they will conjoin at 0 degrees of Aries on, I think it's the 20th of February in 2026. And so, Saturn now moving forward, remember that Saturn does govern endings. Okay. So all those people who have been very distressed by him re-entering Pisces, people with Pisces placements or, tail end of mutable sign placements, those of us who have said, oh, for goodness sake, Saturn, just get out of Pisces already, right? Well, Saturn's now going to be heading out of Pisces. And in the process, we're now doing this final wrapping up of Saturn themes in those areas. I do very much feel that Saturn in Pisces has been about cultivating emotional maturity. In gamer terms, leveling up. Okay. And so this is, between now and February of next year, we've got, just these last couple of months of Saturn moving through the tail end of Pisces and really encouraging us to, among other things, those of us with spiritual practices, this is really a time to work on kind of those practical nuts and bolts. Those of us who are doing intuitive work, this can be very useful for shaping our kind of intuitive container. Okay. Saturn in Pisces for a lot of people has felt like quite a slog. Okay. And that is kind of the nature of Saturn in Pisces, Pisces being ruled by Jupiter, right? Jupiter is expansive. Jupiter doesn't like the boundaries. And Saturn is like, oh, but we need the boundaries. But when Saturn is in Pisces, Saturn is having to operate under Jupiter's rules, right? And so therefore Saturn in Pisces is the Saturnian grind without the boundaries, right? It's seemingly endless. Okay. So, it's been a very paradoxical transit is what I'm getting at. And that's something for us to pay attention to. You know, how do we exert our patience, our self-discipline, our perseverance in places where it seems like the struggle is never ending? And yet remember, Jupiter wants to bring opportunities. So Saturn in Pisces then brings opportunities through facing the slog, through facing the hard work, through doing what we can bit by bit, day by day, to address the difficulties in our lives. Okay. So yes, it's been rough for Pisces placements and for mutable sign placements. But it's also, I think, been very useful within the context of this big grand water trine that we've been experiencing now for the past few months, right? There have been various planets one by one that have stepped into that Scorpio position. That Scorpio position that was has been sort of had as its placeholder behind the scenes. Lilith has been the placeholder for that. And then each of these planets, Mercury and Mars and the sun, and then Mercury again via retrograde, and now Venus is coming up on this. Each of them has been stepping into that third space in Scorpio. And when we're dealing with the deep, intense feelings of scorpionic placements being expanded by Jupiter in Cancer. Oh, and we have that new moon. That reminds me also that new moon in Scorpio in there within this grand water trine. Saturn may have actually been our saving grace. Because while Saturn can certainly, within a trine with a malefic increases the flow of malefic stuff. Okay. And that certainly can increase like the fear, the depression, those kinds of feelings that are Saturnine feelings. It can also increase our taking things seriously in a way that then makes us more willing to address them. It can, Saturn is not known for being gushy, right? And so Saturn actually can help fortify us a little bit when we're dealing with these emotions, right? Can help make it so that maybe the Jupiter expansion of feeling is not quite so extreme. Okay. And can offer us patience. So that, yes, okay, our friend who's having a really hard time with the transit goes off, we can exercise some patience and some self-discipline so that we don't add to their meltdown. Okay. Or so that we provide them a safe, patient space in which to address whatever they're melting down over, right? And vice versa. Okay. A grand water trine is definitely, about the feelings that can connect us or divide us, right? But since Jupiter's in the mix and Jupiter's in the sign of Cancer, Jupiter is encouraging our close connections. Right? Jupiter has enthusiasm for whatever topics he's dealing with, right? Where whatever place he finds himself in and whatever planets he's in aspect to. Okay. So Jupiter is like, oh yeah, all this Scorpio stuff. Let's like enthusiastically, kind of bond over our feelings and have a good cry. Okay. And Saturn is like, okay, but yes, we have to get some work done, so we can't cry all day.
I like that. That's wonderful. Yes, emotions are running high for sure because we've had these water grind trines off and on for a couple of months now.
Yeah, it's been since around the time of the lunar eclipse in September.
Yes. So you ready to move on to the next slide? Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to move on to Mercury. Mercury stations direct on November 29th, and I'm not going to read the time till I get to that slide because I don't know if I changed them. I'm so sorry. So Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo and is associated with the 3rd and 6th house. Mercury retrograde is about redoing, reviewing, and reorganize, which we're finishing up and going to go direct. So we've been doing a lot of that and rethinking. Some key words are communication, siblings, community, mind, learning, quick, intellect, and reasoning, teaching, speaking, writing, games, and commerce. Some cautions are confusion, information overload, deception of self or others, procrastination, indecisive, fence sitting, theft, and gambling. Would you like to add anything?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
So Mercury stationed retrograde on November 9th, and Mercury stations direct on November 29th at 9:38 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the pre-shadow was October 21st through November 9th, and the post-shadow will be November 29th through December 17th. And here in the Seattle chart, we have Mercury in the 11th house at 6 degrees and 51 minutes of Sagittarius. Okay, and then the aspects that we have here are a semi-square with Vesta, a trine to the moon, Jupiter, and Saturn, forming a grand water trine, quincunx to Chiron and Eris, a sesquiquadrate to Ceres and Hygeia, forming a Thor's hammer. And I'll let Simon talk about Lilith when she's ready to get there. But go ahead, Simon.
Okay. Let's see. So we've got, well, there's the semi-square to, oh goodness,
Vesta.
my apologies, my vibe, yeah, there's the semi-square to Vesta. I'm having trouble finding Vesta on the, oh, there she is.
First
Okay.
house.
Oh, okay. Got it. There's the line. I was like, I'm looking for a line to tell me where it is, but I need new glasses, definitely. Okay, so, semi-square, again, brings about that kind of friction, okay? Can be motivating. And with Mercury in Scorpio, I feel like that can be useful for our attention at this time because the semi-square to Vesta does challenge that. Yeah, it's Vesta has entered into Capricorn. And so Vesta is likely to have our focus be on practical matters and long-term goals. Mercury, when Mercury is kind of not doing so great, Mercury can get a little scattered, but in Scorpio, Mercury's not likely to be so scattered. So I actually feel like this sesquiquadrate is, or this semi-square, I should say, is not as semi-square is the 45-degree angle rather than the sesquiquadrate. It's not as scattering. It's not as challenging to our attention. The one thing I do think that it can bring about some challenge is that it can have some of us who are prone to going very deeply into a subject dive down into that to the exclusion of other things, right? So those of us who have really focused attention for certain things, but particularly I'm thinking of folks with ADHD who can be very scattered about some things, but then when their attention is really grabbed, it's like they immerse themselves in it and don't come up for air for quite some time. That's what I see this semi-square as being, as a potential challenge, but it can also be useful in getting us to tackle particular projects, right? Let's see. Obviously, Mercury is within the grand water trine that we've talked about. And what's going on with Lilith there, Mercury and Venus are now both within that grand water trine. Okay. Mercury's reapplying to it. Yeah, so, and Venus is quite thoroughly in it at the time of the station. And Lilith, who has, I use the natural or interpolated Lilith position. She's retrograde at the time of Mercury station and is approximately at the midpoint to Mercury and Venus. So she's really tying them together and again, really firmly cementing their place within the grand water trine. And of course, Mercury is going to be reapplying to the exact trines with Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune. So we've still got a ways to go with all this watery intensity. And, Mercury stepping back into this really puts this stuff on our minds, quite literally, right? But also can very much help us to get to the bottom of things that have previously confounded. This is an excellent combination for research, and Mercury stationing direct moves forward whatever those topics are that we have been re-examining during this time. So wherever Scorpio falls in our charts, Mercury has had us reconsidering matters, Mercury topics of information, organization, commerce, but also deception. And remember, Scorpio is more inclined to be suspicious than other signs and is more like, hey, I know there's something under the surface there. There's something going on behind the scenes and I want to investigate it, right? This is great for moving investigation forward as a result of re-examining the things that Mercury has been looking at during the retrograde. And of course, then all of that feeds into our feelings, right? What do we find while we're investigating? Ooh, now we get all riled up about it. Or potentially find ways to more deeply connect with those who are close to us, again, because of Jupiter being in Cancer during this grand water trine, right? And with Venus being there, then there is that, Venus wants us to connect deeply, passionately while we are in Scorpio. While she is in Scorpio and while Mercury is in Scorpio, this combination of these two suggests we need to talk about some stuff, right? We need to talk about things within our relationships. And in particular, we need to talk about the more difficult topics, okay? With Lilith at that midpoint between the two, Lilith brings up our feelings of alienation, the stuff about ourselves that maybe we don't want to look at, that that we feel demonized for, that, if I'm the black sheep of my family, I'm going to feel that more intensely with Lilith and Scorpio, right? Okay. And then Venus and Mercury are encouraging okay, if we want this relationship to stick together, we got to talk about it, right? But at the same time, because Mercury is in Scorpio, there can be that scorpionic sting, right? So, this is why I say Saturn in Pisces might actually be the MVP of this particular grand water trine, because Saturn in Pisces is like, okay, how do we exercise patience in this situation? How do we make sure that our relationships can stand the test of time? Right? How do we make sure that what we say has long-term impact? And because Mercury and Venus are in Scorpio with Lilith, it's like, okay, yeah, we got to face some hard topics, and we're more willing to face the hard topics. We aren't as afraid to face taboo things when we've got a lot of strong scorpionic placements going on. Okay, so there is benefit to be found, even if things are a little turbulent. However, Mercury is quincunx Chiron and Eris at this time, and that may make it more difficult for us to verbalize the hurts. We recognize that there are topics that need to be addressed, that there are strong feelings at work, that there is alienation to be addressed, that there are people who have gotten the short end of the stick. Lilith advocates on behalf of the marginalized. Okay. And that, and Mercury in Scorpio does recognize, as it's going to be reapplying, or now actually, applying to a conjunction with Venus, okay, we got to bring the conversation to the relationships, but the actual pain, the actual insecurities, the actual wounding, and Eris's drive to expose hypocrisy and people not walking their talk is at work in this quincunx. Okay, so again, tempers can flare. It's something to be aware of. Now, it doesn't automatically mean things will go terribly, right? Because like I said, the scorpionic placements do want to look at it. Okay. But it does mean that there's some friction, there's some tension. Okay. And we can either, acknowledge that may be part of the landscape, or if, we try to ignore it, well, it's probably going to rear its ugly head and we're going to have to deal with it. Okay. Better to go in with our eyes open and say, yeah, I'm willing to acknowledge that this might be part of what we're dealing with. So the Taurus hammer. So we've got this sesquiquadrate to Ceres and Aea. When I mentioned that Ceres and Aea are square each other within, they've been in that the T-square with Vesta. Well, now the square between Ceres and Aea is the base of the Taurus hammer that is pointing to Mercury at the time of the station direct. And that puts a lot of pressure on us to use information well, to be organized, to speak well, to think logically within the context of the grand water trine. That's a lot of pressure. Okay. And it's Ceres and Aea, because they are among the goddess asteroids. I do feel like their influence is a little subtler than if it was one of the major planets, but it still is pressure. It still is something to be aware of, and recognize that, something that's trying to drive us to speak may instead be driving us, that the better use of the energy would be to watch our words, right? To pay attention to what it is that we are saying, especially with Mercury in Scorpio and having that potential scorpionic sting. Okay. Now, one of the things about Scorpio can sometimes clam up, right? Scorpio can freeze up like, a glacier. If they don't want to speak, they ain't speaking. Okay. because Scorpio, being aware of power dynamics, can say, I think this person's going to use this against me if I speak up, right? And so I feel like that may be something that we may have either pressure to speak or pressure to shut up, right? And how that pressure feels, how that's going to play out, depends on the people and the circumstances involved, but it does add to the potential stresses and strains. So again, Ceres does in Aries reminds us to engage in some self-care, right? And I do feel like, within the context of the grand water trine, that Saturn in Pisces is saying, okay, this could get real exhausting. So you have limitations, be mindful of them. Okay. And don't push yourself beyond where your boundaries are. Hold your boundaries, your emotional boundaries. Okay. If you're in a situation where things are really volatile and, you might normally say something, but in this moment, you're like, I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. My heart can't take this right now. Back off. Give yourself some space. Okay. And allow yourself some time to process what's going on. And sometimes that does literally just mean like bowing out and saying, you know what? I do want to discuss this, but right now is not a good time for me to discuss this. Can you give me 5 minutes? Can you give me an hour? Whatever it is. Okay. But I do feel like this whole combination does potentially impel honesty. Now, remember, Mercury's a trickster, and Mercury is very capable of deception. And we do have, Neptune is hanging out with Saturn, so that can kind of fog things and confuse things, right? But Mercury in Scorpio stationing direct, and that is direct, right?
I would say don't ask if you don't want the answer, because it might be pretty strong, and maybe wait a day or so and ask later.
Right. I do feel like it is very much a matter of sussing out what is it that you can handle in the moment, and not biting off more than you can chew in your interactions with other people, because everybody's a little, maybe they're on edge, maybe they're in a good mood, but they're in an intense good mood. I mean, remember that grand water trine brings Jupiter's enthusiasm to the situation. And with both Venus and Mercury, and Lilith all in Scorpio, trine Jupiter, that brings Jupiter's enthusiasm to potentially taboo topics.
Exactly. And maybe some of the information that you gleaned through Mercury retrograde, maybe you don't have all the pieces yet. You might have most of them, but maybe you need to reconfirm the information to make sure it's correct.
Bingo. Especially because anytime we've got the planet stationing, their topics are really being emphasized in that moment. It's not all wine and roses. When Mercury stations direct, it does bring up some of the same stuff that happened when Mercury stationed retrograde. And I do wish to remind people that for those of us who are born under Mercury retrograde, hi, we can actually experience more of the stereotypical Mercury retrograde shenanigans on the station direct or during the retrograde shadow afterward. Okay. For me, I tend to get a lot of Mercury shenanigans during the lead up to a retrograde. But I, I can expect there will probably be some stuff during the shadow, because it's a shift from how I normally perceive thought and communication. And I'm normally in the, Mercury retrograde is like when I typically am like, oh, now I can talk the way I normally like to, and people will like it, not necessarily find it weird. But, your mileage may vary, but just be aware that, for people who are born under Mercury retrograde, it may be now that the shenanigans begin and that you've had, a relatively okay time while everybody else was losing their head. So.
So be patient with yourself and be patient with other people, for sure.
Yep.
Well, I want to thank you, Madam Ximon, for joining me today and sharing here on the Astrology Star Sisters. I want to thank our audience that's watched live and our audience that comes back and watches at a later time. And I'm going to let you share about your Patreon page.
So I write about the transits on Patreon and combine that with creating art connected to, whichever transits I'm choosing to focus on for a particular piece, about once a week. I also include some other posts pertaining to whether it's the artistic process or the transits. And we've got a little Discord as well, and all that good stuff. And so if you're interested in joining the community there, I'd love to see you there. I also do some custom astrological art for my patrons there. And like Liz, I am a consulting astrologer and tarot reader. And so if you wish to schedule a consultation, my website is iconalchemy.com.
Thank you. And I also have a newsletter, and you're watching my YouTube channel, so you can follow me on any of those. I appreciate your support. And I have a variety of shows with Astrology Star Sisters and other shows to watch. And I do 1 to 3 shows a week. So come join us another day. We appreciate your support. I will be on Talk Cosmos. Oh, it's December. I forgot to change the slide for the Sagittarius new moon, so you can watch me here. I want to thank our sponsor, Astro Peregrine Software, an astrology software for Mac and Windows. You can find out more information at astroperegrine.com. And I want to thank everybody again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Simon, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.